Welcome to the Community Garden webinar series brought to you by University of Illinois Extension. My name is Kelly Alsop, and today I partnered with fellow horticulture educator Jennifer Fishburne to present on cool season vegetables. These vegetables actually benefit from growing in the cooler temperatures of spring and fall. Some of them can withstand a light frost, and some can even stand freezing temperatures. A benefit from growing in the cooler season would be fewer pests and less watering needs, but some of these vegetables grow better in cool season, whether preventing flowering, and some actually taste better when grown in the cooler temperatures. Throughout the presentation, I will refer to the last frost date in spring, the first frost date in the fall, and soil temperatures. Please go to the Illinois State Water Survey State Climatologist page for more information specific to your area. I also wanted to point out the fall factor. This is when, because you're growing in those cooler temperatures, you're going to go ahead and add 2 weeks to the growing time. Here is an example. My average frost date is October 14th here in McLean County. I would like to grow lettuce. It's going to take about 30 days to grow. I'm going to add 14 days for the fall factor. So therefore, I must plant on or before September 1st so that I might get a lettuce crop in McLean County before it freezes. I think leafy greens are one of the easiest to grow cool season crops. They mature in very little time, little as 30 days. You can harvest them as soon as they're 3 inches tall. And you can use a nice lettuce mix for, those spring growing mixes that you commonly find in the store, whether it be red lettuce, green lettuce, arugula, endive, Swiss chard, beet leaves, spinach, watercress, to create that nice salad mix. When it comes to leafy greens, my favorite is when it's less than 3 inches. However, you can grow about 7.5 pounds in a 10-foot row. Leafy greens can be grown in full sun to part sun. They're more hardy when they're younger than the mature leaves. Leaves that are larger, like I said, above 3 inches, might be leaves you use for cooking. You're going to plant your leafy greens 30 to 60 days before the last frost-free date in the spring, or as soon as the soil is workable and above 40 degrees, which could be as early as the month of March. You're going to plant these every 2 weeks for a continual harvest. And you're not going to plant or grow when temperatures are above 75 degrees, or else they might bolt and produce a flower. I always overseed my greens so that I may eat the small plants early on when I'm thinning them. Most leafy greens are heavy feeders and will benefit from added organic matter at the time of planting. They prefer consistent moisture, and that will also help prevent them from flowering. You're going to water them about 1 inch per week and mulch the plants with straw. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to say that most vegetables actually do so much better if they are well watered and consistently watered. So not just leafy greens, but pretty much all of them on the list. Leaf lettuces, we don't grow a head lettuce here in Illinois. We just don't have the ideal growing situation. So most of the time we're growing these leafy greens, and they can really give you a considerable amount of harvest. Swiss chard is another leafy green that I really enjoy. It not only is delicious, but it is very ornamental. This one produces well in cool and warm weather. It matures in 28 days for baby leaves and 55 days for like bunching greens. One of the things that you can do is harvest the outer leaves when the seedlings get to be 3 inches tall. And you're going to go ahead and eat these petioles and leaves. The most popular cultivar of Swiss chard is Bright Lights. Now, Swiss chard is actually a beet that has been selected for its wonderful foliage and stem color. Spinach, again, when grown in the cool weather, spinach can be a super easy crop. The only thing that I would suggest is that you get a smoother leaf variety rather than a crinkly leaf variety, so you can avoid that collection of grit on the leaves, which will make it a little bit more labor intensive to clean it up before you eat the spinach greens. Beets are perhaps my most favorite cool season vegetable because I think the greens are very good and I love the root that has a very amazing taste. So this one I kind of like beets because it gives you kind of two harvests. These can mature 50 to 70 days. You can produce 10 pounds of beets in a 10-foot row. They can grow in full sun to part shade. Beets require even watering, but they can grow in low fertility soil, so addition of organic matter is not necessarily. They need frequent weeding as they are poor competitors. You're going to plant your beet seeds as soon as the soil is workable, and beets may take a little while for them to germinate. Some people have difficulty with germinating seed beets, and I do too. So one of the methods that I do is I do a pre-sprouting method. The reason we have difficulties may be because the seed is planted too deep or subsequent watering causes the soil to crust over. So like I said, I do a pre-sprouting, which means I put my beet seeds in a wet paper towel, put them in a plastic bag with a few holes. I keep it wet, and in about 5 to 7 days, I will have a new root, also known as the radicle. Once that happens, I'll go ahead and plant my beet seeds at that time. I also do successive plantings up until the middle of July because I don't want all my beets at one time. And you can interplant your beets with vegetables like broccoli and tomatoes. Remember I said they would take a little bit of shade. You're going to harvest those beets when they're 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter. The beets grown in cooler temperatures, maturing in the cooler temperatures. So those beets that you seed in July and are actually maturing in September and October are actually going to be sweeter. Beets that are over 3 inches may be tough and fibrous, so don't wait too long. It's better to have a smaller beet than a beet that is not edible. Beets come in red, white, yellow, or striped. Like I said, my favorite part about beets is that the tops are edible and they're actually really delicious. That's why I tend to overseed a little bit so I can thin my cuttings. So when they're about 3 to 4, my seedlings. When they're about 3 to 4 inches tall, I'm going to go ahead and thin them to 2 to 3 inches apart. And I'm going to eat those seedlings, and they're going to be a tasty treat early in the season. The ones that I've left behind to grow for the roots, I can actually take up to 1/3 of the foliage without altering my root production. Broccoli can be a difficult crop to grow because of bolting and pest issues, but it's best grown in full sun, and you can get 8 pounds of broccoli in a 10-foot row. Like I said, the bolting and the pest issues, the bolting is because it might not be planted early enough, and that's probably because maybe you waited too long to plant your broccoli. And pest issues, we know with cabbage worms, broccoli can be quite difficult to grow, which is why I would suggest using a row cover rather than not grow the broccoli. You can plant transplants 12 to 20 inches apart if you want big heads, and 36 inches between the rows. A closer spacing will form smaller heads. However, once the large head is removed, side heads will continue to develop. Broccoli will mature from transplants in 60 to 65 days. You're going to go ahead and put your broccoli transplants out 3 weeks before the last frost date in spring. You can start those seeds indoors about 5 weeks earlier than that. For a fall planting, you can plant in late June to early July. Plant those transplants slightly deeper and make sure they have 5 or more true leaves. You're going to mulch your broccoli to protect the roots from weeds and drying out. And again, use those row covers to prevent the pest from even laying their eggs in the first place. Brussels sprouts. It is a slow growing and long season crop, but everybody loves a good Brussels sprout on the dinner plate. It can grow in full sun. It produces the little sprouts in the leaf axil of the plants. You're going to space those transplants about 24 to 36 inches apart. Once the transplants are planted, it'll take 90 to 100 days. And that you're going to count back from the first frost in the fall. Like I said, slow growing, long season. Needs consistent moisture. Once the plants reach about 12 inches tall, you're going to add a side dressing of nitrogen. They actually have a better flavor after the frost in the fall. About 3 weeks before you plan to harvest the plants, you can top them, and this will speed up the growth of those sprout buds. You're going to go ahead and harvest those sprout buds when they're about 1 to 2 inches in diameter. Cabbage is a big grower, a lot of produce, 20 pounds of cabbage for a 10-foot row. It grows in full sun. Again, this is not something you want to plant where you've grown co-crops the year before. You're going to use transplants. I would suggest planting multiple varieties so that you can have a continued harvest. Your transplants those spring crops 3 to 4 weeks before the last frost-free day in the spring. Transplant your fall crops in the second week of July. You're going to plant them 8 to 12 inches apart for early varieties and 12 to 24 inches for later varieties. Cabbage requires a soil high in organic matter, so that addition where you're growing your cabbage can be of great benefit. You can use a starter fertilizer also when the plants are half grown. That fertilizer is going to add nitrogen. Consistent moisture is key, especially when you're starting those plants and those heads are developing. There's different kinds of cabbage: green, red, purple, Savoy, Chinese, mini. Chinese cabbage is actually best grown in the fall, as late spring frost may cause them to start flowering early. You're going to cut the head high when it's firmed before there are any cracks, leaving a few outer leaves intact. Spring plantings of cabbage will actually regrow little cabbage sprouts for subsequent harvest. They grow about 2 to 4 inches. Maturity, depending on the cultivar or the variety, may take 60 to 90 days. Carrots, one of the easiest to grow, and looking at this picture, kids love growing and harvesting carrots. You can grow 10 pounds of carrots in a 10-foot row. They require full sun. You're going to plant that seed as soon as the soil is workable and above 40 degrees. The soil should be loose and cultivated about 8 to 9 inches so the carrot roots don't have a lot of resistance to growing. Excess organic matter at the time of planting can actually cause carrots to fork. I do find it difficult to seed carrots because the seeds are so small. One of the things that you could potentially do is mix it with a sand or a vermiculite so you're not seeding so close together. Carrots are a very hardy cool season crop. Cool temperatures actually increase the sugar content. Germination takes about 2 weeks. Then on with the thinning. You want to thin them when they're about an inch tall, about 1 to 2 carrots per inch for baby carrots, and then one seedling per 2 inches for larger carrots. Eat the carrot greens that you pull out in a fresh salad or make a pesto with them. As the carrots grow, you may want to cover the tops with a bit of soil at least 3 to 4 weeks after planting to prevent green tops, which is a sunburn. If you don't get this done, you can always just cut it off and eat the rest of the carrot, no problem. You're going to use straw or mulch to extend the harvest until the ground freezes. Fall carrots can be left into the ground until a killing frost. These are actually much, much sweeter than carrots grown in the spring. You're going to harvest when they're a half to 1 inch in diameter. So the baby carrots take about 50 to 60 days, and the larger carrots take about 60 to 80 days. Collard greens, again, this is one I like because you tend to get more of a harvest. You can potentially get 3 harvests from a collard green. So these grow in full sun. They're actually more tolerant of warm weather than some of the other greens we've talked about. You do not want to plant these where other cole crops have grown before. Cole crops meaning cabbage, kale, broccoli. You're going to go ahead and plant in early spring for a summer harvest or midsummer for a fall harvest. Again, as soon as the soil is workable, collards are ready to go. You're going to thin your seedlings to 6 inches apart by removing the plants. That's your first harvest. You can eat those little baby seedlings. Then again, when the plants start to touch, you're going to thin them to 18 inches apart. That's your second harvest. And then you're going to start harvesting the outer leaves as they grow up when they're about 6 to 12 inches tall, and that will be your third harvest. You're going to these need ample soil moisture. Like I said, moisture is key for many of our garden vegetables, and they're going to mature about 50 days from seeding. Kale. Kale is the new cool vegetable because actually kale has so much nutrition. It's almost tragic not to have it in your diet. But it can be grown very easily. Full sun to part shade. More tolerable of summer heat, but actually taste best when grown in the cool season. Kale has been seen to last into mild winters. You're going to plant your kale by seed, thin those seedlings to 8 to 12 inches apart. Again, those seedlings should go into your first harvest. You're going to pick those outer leaves while they are still small. You can have baby leaves in 30 days, which means you have one big harvest and that's it. Or your plant will start to mature in 55 to 75 days. And if you look in the picture here, you remove the leaves as the kale grows up, and ultimately it looks like a palm tree if you're doing it right. Kohlrabi, a very interesting vegetable and delicious, but not so common. It grows in full sun, can stand some light shade. It's a hardy, cool season vegetable, which means it can take some pretty cold temperatures. You can plant the seed when the soil is workable and above 40 degrees. You're going to thin those seedlings to 2 to 5 inches apart when the plants are about a few inches high. Again, you can eat those seedlings in early harvest. You can do a succession planting every 2 to 3 weeks for a continued harvest. Young leaves can be used like cooking greens. The kohlrabi is best harvested by cutting at the ground level when the stem is 1 inch but no larger than 2 to 3 inches in diameter. There's green and purple varieties, and the kohlrabi stem matures in 55 to 70 days and has a very fresh green taste. Mustard greens, it's a great crop to grow for the baby leaves. Full sun to part shade. You're going to plant 3 weeks before that last spring frost date and do successive plantings every 3 weeks. You're going to plant in middle to late summer for a fall crop. You're going to thin those seedlings to 3 to 5 inches apart when they start to touch. This one needs ample fertility and consistent watering. You can pick those leaves when they're young and tender. 21 days for baby leaves that might go into a salad, and 45 days for full-size leaves that will be cooked. Onion, yeah, another really great crop and commonly grown in gardens all over Illinois. You can get 16 pounds of onions in a 10-foot row. Rather than planting onion seed, we plant onion sets, which kind of look like little tiny garlic cloves. You're going to plant those onions when the soil is workable and above 40 degrees. You're going to look at those onion sets and decide how you're going to use them, because you can grow green onions or you can grow for the large round dry bulbs. So the larger sets of those onions should be used for the green onions, and the smaller ones, which are less than a dime, should be used for the dry bulbs. Otherwise, they'll mature too quickly and you need them to grow a little bit longer. Onions require good fertility, consistent soil moisture, and they like the cool temperatures. For green onions, you're going to plant that onion set 1 inch deep and close enough to touch. To develop the white stems, you're going to hill up the soil when the greens are about 4 inches tall. For dry onions, you're going to plant them 1 inch deep and 2 to 4 inches apart. You do not have to hill up with the soil. It's going to take about 90 to 100 days for onions to develop from sets. You're going to allow that plant to mature and fall over in late July to early August. If any flowers appear, go ahead and pull that and use it as a green onion. Then you're going to cure your onions in a dry, shaded location with the tops braided, leaving those skins intact. This is one of the crops that I can't seem to get harvested because all the kids in my neighborhood eat it up. So over 8 pounds of peas can be produced from 10-foot row. It's one of those wonderful, while you're working in the garden, go graze on the peas. Full sun to part shade. You're going to plant the peas when the soil temperatures remain above 45 degrees. You're going to plant those seeds 1 inch deep and 1 inch apart. Sometimes peas come with a nitrogen-fixing bacteria, sort of an inoculant on the pea. This is kind of a fairly inexpensive and readily available seed inoculant that it may actually benefit you if you have a new, less established garden. Peas benefit from mulching because the soil remains cool. They also like trellising. This will help you from not missing any peas that may be ready to be picked. We have edible pod peas, whether there's sugar or snow. You pick these before the pods actually fill. And then we have garden shell peas, and you pick those when the pods are full size. You can harvest your peas 55 to 85 days from seeding, depending on which one you use. Potatoes, perhaps one of the easiest, most fun to grow. I always grow potatoes in the children's gardens because the kids love digging them up. So 15 pounds of potato in a 10-foot row. Another benefit of having a potato is you don't have to hurry up and eat the harvest. You can save this for a later date. Um, it requires full sun at least 6 hours a day. They can be planted in late March to early April. Maximum tuber formation occurs when the soil temperatures are between 60 and 70 degrees, but they actually fail to expand when it's greater than 80 degrees. I like to plant small whole potatoes 10 to 12 inches apart, 2 to 3 inches deep. However, if you have a rather large garden, that may be quite expensive, so you're going to plant 2-ounce pieces that have a good eye, which means a part that, a little notch. And you see in that heart-shaped potato, there's several little eyes there, and that will expand it. The reason that I plant my small whole potatoes is because I don't want to deal with diseases, and usually I'm planting a smaller location. One of the things that I find that you can, potentially turn around and try to do a fall crop of these potatoes, but there's difficulty in finding those tubers for that timing of crop. So if you want to do that, you might have to save it. And the potatoes that grown at the market are usually sprayed with a growth inhibitor. So you definitely want to go to a store, a garden center, and buy seed potatoes. You're going to harvest them when the tops start to turn brown in early August to September. For new potatoes, you can dig earlier. I've harvested in July because the kids couldn't wait, and we had several potatoes. We didn't have to wait for it to turn brown, but we probably would have gotten more had we waited a little bit longer, or they might have been larger. Potatoes are usually in the top 4 to 6 inches of the soil, so be careful not to scrape the skin off when digging. If you do scrape the skin off, that's the first one you eat. A lot of people grow it in layers of straw. I've grown potatoes in straw bales, and it made for harvesting very easy. Radishes. I really think we should all grow radishes because they're so easy and they're so fast. 10 bunches of radishes can be produced in a 10-foot row. Full sun to part shade. You can plant these 3 to 6 weeks before frost and succession planting every 1 to 2 weeks. You can interplant them with broccoli or your Brussels sprouts. The cultivar French breakfast is a heat tolerant um, cultivar, especially if you, make sure you do your supplemental watering. You're going to harvest the round shaped radishes when they're 1 inch in diameter, about 28 days from seeding. The long radishes may take double that, up to 55 days. Winter radishes will grow slower than spring, but are larger, crisper, and have a better flavor. One of my favorite radishes is daikon radishes, and these are larger, all white, and have a milder taste, and I would consider these in the long radish category. Turnips. Over 16 pounds of turnips can be produced in a 10-foot row. They can be grown in full sun to part shade. Only 28 days for you to get greens, and you can thin those seedlings to 2 to 4 inches apart for sufficient root growth. Again, you would never throw those seedlings away, as those are an early garden harvest for you. It matures in 38 to 50 days. You'll harvest those turnips when they're about 2 to 3 inches in diameter, and they are actually sweetened by the cooler weather. I use several references. I love our local foods and small farm educator Bill Davison has made a garden schedule, particularly for Central Illinois. Go to this website and you'll see what he's done, and you can perhaps adjust it for your area. There's a lot of great information on harvesting and using particular vegetables on Watch Your Garden Grow. Again, I wanted to pull back up the Illinois State Water Survey State Climatologist Office so that you can look and see when these frost dates are, what your soil temperatures are. And you can also look at your weather pattern and track things. There's a lot of misnomers out there about what is your frost-free date. When should you plant your garden? And so this will give you a better idea of that. Thank you very much for listening to the Community Garden webinar series, Cool Season Vegetables. Thank you for your time.